So welcome everyone. We are so excited. This is our very first bite-sized conversation that we're hosting at Pivot and Core. And these are intended to be brief, but really substantial conversations that we have with some experts around topics that we're passionate about and care deeply about. And so I'm so excited to be here. I'm Dr. Monica Ng. I'm the Vice President of Education Programs at Pivot Learning and focused on prevention and intervention. And I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Carrie Thomas Beck. And hi, Carrie.
Hey, Monica.
And she can introduce herself.
Yeah, so Monica, do you want to switch to the next slide? There we go. So welcome everybody. As Monica said, my name is Carrie Thomas Beck, and I work for the Consortium on Reaching Excellence in Education, which is a subsidiary of Pivot Learning. And my role at CORE is the Director of Literacy. So I'm really pleased to be here today with Monica to talk with Dr. English. So I wanted to start just by introducing our speaker, Dr. Sherril English, and tell you a little bit about her background. So first of all, hi, Sherril, and welcome.
Hello, Monica and Carrie.
Thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be able to talk with you all today.
Excellent. Well, let me share a little bit about your background with our listeners. So Sherril is currently a clinical associate professor in the Simmons School of Education at Southern Methodist University. And she works within the Department of Teaching and Learning and the Department of Educational Leadership. Sherril focuses on teacher and principal preparation and also provides one-on-one classroom support and coaching to novice teachers. Sherril has taught for over 15 years at all grade levels and served as a K-6 principal for more than a decade. Sherril has been an advisor, collaborator, and professional learning provider on school culture and equitable teaching practices to school districts and nonprofits in the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. Sherril has research and scholarly interests in recognizing and incorporating student voice in decision-making structures and practices within urban schools. And also Sherril is an advisory member for SMU's First Generation College Student Initiative. So again, welcome Sherril, thanks for being here.
Thank you again.
And Dr. English is now an advisory board member for CORE.
So yes.
Because that's a really exciting opportunity for us to work more closely with you. So we're very, very excited you could be with us today.
All right, so a little bit of a preview about what we'll be discussing with Dr. English today. A couple of different things. First of all, we want to focus today's conversation on the current inequities in the way schools identify students with reading disabilities and then provide reading and instruction and support. So that's sort of the main topic for today's conversation. And then specifically, we'll talk a little bit about how to reduce barriers so that all students can receive the support that they need to become successful readers, with a particular focus on Black, Latinx, and low-income students. Sherril will talk a little bit about some ideas for how to work with families on how to provide reading support to students at home. And finally, Sherril will wrap up with providing some advice for administrators regarding how school systems can better serve all students who experience difficulties with reading, especially students with dyslexia.
So I'm going to kick us off, Sherril. So thanks again for being with us. And I'm hoping that you can talk a little bit about how in your 30 years as an educator, both as a teacher in the classroom and as a principal in elementary schools, you have seen or experienced inequities in the way that we provide reading instruction in schools.
Absolutely. And again, thank you so much, Carrie and Monica. So first of all, let me just give you a little bit of background in terms of where most of my work has taken place. Um, First of all, I absolutely believe in the importance of service. And I tell people I am a product of Dallas Independent School District, and I grew up in the southern sector of Dallas, which is a very low income neighborhood. And without the help of so many people, community people and people in my church, I don't think that I would be able to really recognize the importance of service to children in the way that I do now. So my work at St. Philip's School and Community Center, St. Philip's is a private independent school in the southern sector of Dallas. My work there for, again, over a decade as a principal and several years as a teacher and a curriculum director really worked with 95% of the students being African American, and let's say the remainder Latino or Latinx children. And what I realized, even though St. Philip's is a private school, many of the families, probably about 40% of the children, come from that low income neighborhood. And then the remainder of the students come from other areas all across the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, but they come to St. Philip's for equitable teaching and learning. Many parents said, you know, I'm coming to St. Philip's because my child was in another public school or in another school someplace else, and I just felt like we struggled with racial issues. And so because of that, many parents were willing to drive from wherever they lived. Some parents drove 30, 45 minutes to get to St. Philip's. And so St. Philip's had this unique student body made of, again, about 40% of the students coming from the low income neighborhood, and then 60% of students coming from all over the city of Dallas and Fort Worth. And I'll mention also that some of the children in the 60%, their parents were professionals, attorneys, doctors. So it's really a very, very special place. In addition to that, when I first came to SMU, I knew that I would be, you know, working with novice teachers, also with teachers who are earning a master's degree. But I quickly realized that the novice teachers are these young teachers who go into very high poverty neighborhoods, low income schools, and they are teaching, again, 100% African American and Latino students. And so many of those teachers struggle with the expertise, I would say, of knowing how to teach reading. It's their first year. Some of those teachers are part of, I guess we would call programs that aren't your traditional teacher education programs, but they've taken all of the credit hours or whatever they need to become a teacher, but they didn't really get a very, very good foundation in how to teach reading, and they also didn't get a foundation in terms of how to work with African American and Latino children. So that's basically been my experience. When we think about my years as an educator and the inequities, I would say probably there are two primary things that concern me when I go out into schools now and also over my years as an administrator. One of the major concerns has to do with teacher knowledge. I do believe that knowledge is power. I know that there's someone who said that along the way, and that's very, very important. The key, however, is teachers really want, especially those who are working with children who are in kindergarten to second grade, they really want to make a difference in the lives of children. They really want to do a good job. The concern, however, is most of the time, teachers overwhelmingly teach the way they were taught, especially if they have not received any other specific expertise on how to teach reading. As a result, they they're in their position of power, they're able to take what they've learned and consistently apply that to the students in the classroom. Teacher knowledge of dyslexia or children who struggle with reading, however, is not always evidence-based research. And so teachers are using curriculum. This was certainly my experience when I was at St. Philip's, when I first began there as a principal. Teachers are using a curriculum and they're just following along with whatever the curriculum says. If it is not specifically evidence-based research, the teachers really don't know that. So they don't understand the fact that, well, it says to read this book to the children, so I read it, and the kids are going to have this for homework, and I figure from that, children will learn how to read. That may sound like, to some of you all, what I now think is called balanced literacy, but of course, when I was earning my master's several years ago, it was really more of a whole language type learning program. And so I still see that type of instruction in schools. And every time I do, I realize the inequities that children are facing, because I firmly believe that phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, comprehension, those are the ways that children are going to learn. And so if teachers have not been taught in those ways, to me, that's one of the primary inequities that students are facing. I think my second major concern that I see a lot in schools now has to do with kind of your data, or I don't want to call it data, maybe it's assessment-driven instruction, right? So we're actually using assessments in the classroom to drive the instruction. So if you're giving your students a phonemic awareness test and they don't do well on that test, then you're looking back and you're saying, okay, what is it that my student missed? But if teachers have not been taught that type of instruction, then they don't know that students are not really learning. And that's where students get bogged down in this area of inequitable teaching and learning.
I think you bring up so many amazing points just in that answer, Cheryl, around sort of the current state of where we are with reading instruction. And I wonder if you feel like it, as things have changed and evolved for you as an educator, if you feel like you see other people also coming along, or is there still a lot of resistance to the idea of using phonics and phonemic-based teaching versus whole language? Are you, in your experience, are you seeing a change right now?
Thank you. That is such an interesting question. And I think what's so interesting about it is the reason I'm seeing a change is because teachers are coming into teacher education programs, or at least our teacher education program here at SMU, and we realize the importance of phonemic-based instruction, phonics-based instruction, right? But as I go out and observe novice teachers and talk with the other teachers, or possibly even principals in those schools, I realize that not everyone is using that type of instruction. So you've got basically, you know, you've got some teachers who are using still that whole language because that's what they've always used, and that's what they are using as based on the curriculum. And then you've got teachers who are in teacher education programs, or at least in the program here at SMU, and they are realizing, oh no, you have to use, you know, phonics-based or phonemic-based awareness instruction. So unfortunately, it's occurring in schools in two different ways. And trying to get teachers who have always used a balanced literacy or a whole language instruction curriculum, trying to get them to change is really difficult. And I think it's difficult because the leadership sometimes in the schools is not requiring it.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Cheryl. So Dr. Julie Washington of Georgia State University has said that, and these are her words, I go into poor schools. Nobody has dyslexia in a poor school. In the face of a population where 8.5 out of 10 are struggling with reading, who has a reading disability? The answer is, we have no idea. So I wanted to share that quote with you and ask if Julie's words ring true with your experiences. And if so, what do you think contributes to this issue?
Well, first of all, it does ring true. Second of all, of course, it breaks my heart because what we're talking about is poor schools. That's where I serve. That's where the teachers in the program here at SMU serve. And so we've got mostly, again, students of color and families low income. And so the children are doing what they have been asked to do, and so are the teachers, I would say. But of course, it's inequitable, and the primary reason that it's inequitable, in my opinion, is it has a lot to do with instruction. Let me mention this briefly. So several years ago, I attended a meeting in the Dallas School District, and I promise you I have a point, but I just kind of want to mention this. So while I was in that meeting, it had everything to do with students who received an excessive number of discipline referrals. And so those students were really kind of getting up there, and the numbers in the schools were just overwhelming. And I think we all know that in many low-income neighborhoods, high-poverty schools, there's an overwhelmingly large disparity between students who are referred in terms of discipline, and then, of course, comparing that with other schools in other neighborhoods where there's more of a affluent population. But the reason I bring that up is because in that meeting, one of the administrators said, as of today, we are no longer allowed to give students referrals, discipline referrals, and that has come from the Texas Education Agency. So the reason I bring that up is because there are so many different policies and procedures that teachers have to follow, even though they realize my students aren't learning. Yeah, they may not be learning, but this is the policy and this is what you have to do. And so with that being said, there's a large number of students who are resegregated, or schools that are resegregated now in neighborhoods where it's all about the children in those neighborhoods are all students of low income. And the concern, I think, is that administrators are saying, well, we don't want to refer too many children to special education. So I believe that there is a policy that says if students are coming from poor neighborhoods, then we have to be careful how many students we actually refer for special education, or how many students we actually refer for testing. So again, like the discipline, it's like, it's too many, let's put a halt on that. And so in essence, to me, that is an inequity, because what we're saying is there are children in classrooms right now who are struggling, and we know that there are because of COVID. They didn't finish their last school year, and they've even started this school year online, and we know that children are struggling. Are those children ever going to be assessed Or are we going to say, well, you know, the TEA says we can only refer so many students, or if the students are coming from a poor neighborhood, then we're not allowed to refer them for assessment.
Yeah, you know, Cheryl, that's been my experience too, when you see this kind of this sense of under referral in the early grades, which sometimes, but not always, results in over referral in later grades. And we all know that we have the best chances of helping students be successful if we provide early intervention in reading. So we need to be closely monitoring student progress and assessing further for those students who are experiencing difficulties, and do that without hesitation. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Certainly.
And I would just add too that your earlier point about, if we don't change to evidence-based instruction, we're not likely to be able to change outcomes for students. So even the process, I think, of identifying and referring kids for special education, even once you have the label of dyslexia, you still need instruction. And if it's not evidence-based instruction, then having that label is not really a benefit.
Right. And
So,
I thank you for saying that, because also, and I have to certainly admit this, when I was a first grade teacher, I definitely had students in my classrooms, and I'll talk about this later a little bit, but I definitely had students in my classrooms who absolutely struggled with reading. And so if you, the instructor or the teacher, if you're not aware that children are struggling, regardless to where these children come from, regardless of the fact that they are coming from a poor neighborhood, or it doesn't really matter. Someone has to step in and say, what does research say about how I am supposed to instruct this child, so that we can begin right now to make a difference for these children.
right.
Absolutely.
And when I worked in low-income schools that had 8.5 out of 10 students struggling with reading, and that was apparent in their assessments, you know, that there is no, you know, what we would say often is, you can't intervene your way out of that, and unless you're willing to make the hard choices and deal with the issues in your core curriculum. Because 8 out of 10 kids should not be struggling if you are using effective reading practices. And I think those are some of the hard conversations that we haven't had, that the teacher is doing her job and teaching her curriculum.
Yep.
The students are doing the activities they're supposed to be doing, but there's this mismatch between what they need and what they're being provided.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think, you know, we'll talk a little bit later, but you know, when you're the leader of a school, you have to be aware of what is happening in that classroom. I remember being a principal, and there's so much to do. You know, you could get to school before 6 in the morning and not leave until 7 in the evening. And there were times that I would think, wait, did I not make it to even one classroom today? And that can never happen. You have to go into the classrooms to see what is happening. That's another way you figure out, this curriculum doesn't seem to be working. Teachers may even say, well, I'm using it, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. See, here it is. We used to even have teachers videotape themselves, and we'd just be like, yep, they're using the curriculum, but it's not effective. So that means you're at the top. Changes have to take place.
Yeah, that's great.
Agreed.
So yeah, now we get to talk about some of those solutions. I don't know if you're aware of some of Emily Hannaford's reporting for APM. She's been talking a lot about reading instruction and about some of these gaps in equity related to reading instruction. And so one of her quotes from one of her recent reports was, "Getting what you need for a kid with dyslexia is a rich man's game." And so we're here and we all want to serve. And so we're trying to think about what can we do to reduce these barriers so that more students can have access to the kinds of interventions and supports that we know how to provide, that these students need to become successful readers.
Right. You know, when I first read that, honestly, I had not heard of that quote, but when I read it, I was like, okay, let me go look up Emily Hanford, because she is 100% correct. Again, St. Philip's private school, every parent had to pay something. So not all the parents paid the same tuition. Those parents who were, attorneys or doctors, they paid whatever the full tuition was. But if you were a low-income parent, you lived in this neighborhood, and your income with maybe 3 or 4 children was at poverty level, you still had to pay something, because, we want you to make the investment in your children. But if the child was struggling academically, now the question becomes, the parent's already paying tuition and sacrificing a great deal. Then how in the world am I supposed to also now pay for a tutor, pay for additional assessments? How is that going to happen? And I'll tell you a quick little story. When I was a first grade teacher, I had these 2 students, and I'll just use their names. Let's say they were Jean and Julia. In Texas, kindergarten is not required. So let's say that Jean actually just had been at home with her grandmother, just getting all the love in the world. And so there's nothing, now that I'm a grandmother of a 10-month-old, there's nothing better, right? And so Jean she had been at home, wasn't required to go to kindergarten in Texas, so she came to St. Philip's as a little first grader. Let's say that Julia, on the other hand, had actually been in preschool. She had been in pre-K3, pre-K4, and kindergarten, and came to St. Philip's as a little first grader. So keep in mind, Julia is the one with all of the experience, all of the knowledge, because she's been to preschool. Jean got all the love at home and didn't have very much knowledge at all. They both came into first grade behind, and so we started working with them. And I say we because at that time we had an opportunity to have 2 certified teachers in a classroom, 23 students. That was a lot of students to me for a private school, but we did have 2 teachers. And so I had both of those children kind of in my group for reading. And I realized that Jean, the little girl who had been home with her family, her grandmother, was just picking up everything. She was just, it was amazing how quickly she was learning with no preschool experience. Julia, on the other hand, kept falling behind. She just could not figure out phonemic awareness, phonics instruction, all the different games that we played, removing the beginning sound, rhyming words, all of that. She just absolutely struggled. So when her grandmother came to pick her up from school every day, I told her grandmother, I really am going to have a meeting, with you all and with her parents, because she's really struggling. So when I met with the mom, single mother, and the grandmother, she said, Miss English, there's no way that we can afford to help pay for anything additional. We are struggling right now just to pay the tuition. So when I think about Emily Hanford's point, I think about that second little girl, and knowing that her parents did not have any extra money to help. So as the principal of the school later years, I realized there's some things that we can do for those students. One of the things, of course, is to make sure that teachers are receiving evidence-based phonemic awareness, phonics type instruction. That absolutely has to happen. You've got to look at your curriculum, and you've got to be sure that the curriculum is what is needed for children. Because if you don't, you can't even figure out that the children are struggling. And before you know it, they're second or third graders, and now we have a problem. That's the first thing. I realized that later, when I became principal, that we needed to network. We needed to work with other private schools, other agencies, anyone who said, yes, we can provide additional assistance, and here's the way that we do it. And actually, in a way, I learned from some of my colleagues now here at SMU. I learned to work with them. They had a program here at SMU at that time for young children, and it was a free program, and parents could bring the children, and they received the type of instruction that was phonemic based, phonemic awareness based. So, you know, when you think about a rich man's game, there are ways to make sure that children who are in high poverty schools or in low income neighborhoods, there is a way to help parents. I think one of the other ways, volunteer tutoring. If you can find people, we had a grandparents program, I'll just say this, at St. Philip's, and although the grandparents couldn't necessarily teach phonemic awareness, what they could do was read to the children every day. And by the way, reading alone, I will say, is not exactly going to really make a difference when a child is actually struggling or has been identified with having some type of learning disability, but it still helps the child with content knowledge and everything. So we had that, and we established a community program with parents and with after school care community workers who would come in and work with our students. So, you know, there are ways to make sure that children get the additional help that they need. Just because parents don't have the money, we cannot say, oh, well, we're sorry, we're doing the best that we can. That is not acceptable.
You know, I'm hearing a common theme here, Cheryl, and that is the power of strong instruction as being a solution. And I appreciate you bringing that up. And I also really appreciate the ideas that you shared about networking. I think that makes a great deal of sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I just have to also really praise, because it seems to come so naturally for you, but maybe not for others, is the leadership, right?
Yeah.
As a principal in that role, you recognize that if we don't step up as a school and as a community, right? So you didn't put that expectation on that single mother to go out and find the community resources. You said, we're going to find the community resources and make those connections and make sure that this is accessible to all of our students. And I think that is so critical as a leader to recognize that. And so just really want to compliment you on that, because again, I know that there are a lot of teachers even who know that their students may need more, but they're not getting that support from their school leadership. So teachers are trying their best to sort of piece things together. Mm-hmm. But when it's so much more powerful when it comes from a school leader who can really say, these are agencies and organizations that we're going to partner with to make sure that we're getting high quality things for our students. So I think that's a great example as well.
Yes, and being proactive, and rather than just expecting that the parents or families would come up with the solution, indeed, it's the school's responsibility. So it was great to see you share that example.
Exactly.
Okay, so we know that support from home is invaluable, and you've brought that up a little bit today already. So what suggestions do you have when working with families whose child may be experiencing difficulties with reading? What do you tell families? What are strategies that they can use at home to support their child?
Well, of course, again, as I said a few moments ago, I have a 10-month-old granddaughter, and just briefly, when her parents had her baby shower, we asked all of her friends to make sure to bring a book instead of a greeting card. And so the idea behind that for us was, it is our job at home, when the child is at home, to read to the child. That is our number one responsibility when it comes to educating children. I know that exposure and all of these other things, I realize that that is important. And even when I was the principal, parents would say, oh, we didn't get to do the homework last night. And I made a pact with my teachers, and I said to them, at least once, maybe twice a week, if a child doesn't complete his or her homework, could you please just say to the parents, just make this a standing rule, even if your child can't complete homework, please read to them for 15 minutes a night and put them to bed with a kiss. If we can just do that, if there are some families who can do that. And I remember one of our families, the parents did not speak English, and our librarian found so many children's books. I'm going to kind of age myself now, books on tape, and she sent home a tape recorder, and the parents would read to that child in Spanish, and then they would put the child in the bed and turn on that tape recorder, and the child would hear the same stories in English, right? And so there are so many things that parents can do. But I would say this, first of all, meet with parents. Don't just let parents struggle. Oftentimes parents know that something is wrong. They just don't know exactly what it is. Children say, oh, I don't want to go to school today. I don't feel, and parents begin to get concerned. They talk to the teacher, and the teacher says, well, we're working on it. We're working on it. That's not good enough. Sit down, meet with the parents, and say, yes, this is what you can do at home, whatever it is that you're telling them. I think also one of the things I'm most proud of, or I was as principal at St. Philip's, is providing training for parents. Parents don't know, we're educators. Parents don't know when you're reading that you use your finger with very young children and you're just following along. Left to right progression is so important. But if parents don't know that, they're reading, but is the child really picking up on some of the important skills that he or she is going to need when they begin learning to read? So meet with parents, talk with them, help parents to get the type of training. Even if the training is not from a specialist, guess what? I used to tell teachers, we're the professionals. So you know what? The training is going to be the training that you offer the parents so that they know exactly what it is that they need to do. Recommend books that are important, that children will enjoy reading, and that the content is around the age for the children. And then finally, I will say this, just because this is what I'm doing now. Seek out reading programs at colleges and universities. And the reason I can say that, I teach a course here at SMU. It's called Literacy and Society. I have undergraduate students who are not necessarily education majors. I teach them with those 5 essential components of reading. I teach them how to work with young children in kindergarten, first and second graders in the area of reading using those 5 essential components. We have a reading curriculum that we use, and that curriculum has ebooks. It has, different warm-up word cards for sight words and everything. And then it also has games. But the key to this is, when COVID happened last year, my students were working at a community center. All of a sudden we realized, oh no, we can't go out into the community center anymore. So what did I do? I reached out to my teachers at St. Philip's, but I also reached out to some of my master's teachers, and I ended up getting 20 kindergarten through second grade children who were being tutored by my students. And guess what? That's what we're doing now as well. And so parents need to know there is help. And I think that is what our job is, to help parents know we are the professionals, but we can help you. There are things that you can do. I hope that that, kind of came together in terms of making sense.
Absolutely, Cheryl. And I so appreciate you, one, making the point, start simple. So if parents can begin by just reading with their children, I think that is so hugely important given the context of the world right now, where we have parents at home trying to work full time and support their children. My youngest is in high school, so I'm fortunate in that he's very independent.
Yes.
But parents who are at home with younger children, they have a lot on their plates right now, and the level of stress is so high. So if you can keep it simple, and also I love your idea about looking for support. What are those free options in your community, and especially in your universities? Because that's a wonderful support for families.
Yes, it is. And I tell you, my class meets every Tuesday and Thursday, and this semester I only have 12 students, 12 SMU students, and the tutoring is one-on-one. I wouldn't try to put, a group of students with undergraduates, college students, but the parents are so appreciative. I tell the parents, log on at 3:45, and the program goes until 4:40. Parents log on at 3:30. 3:30 is when I meet with my students for about 15 minutes, and then parents log on. I have parents logging on at 3:30 because they realize how important this program is for their children.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And just to connect it with one of the earlier points you made too, I think that I had the privilege of doing a parent training and talking about trying to empower parents, and said, these are some of the reading assessments that your school should be offering your child. And you should understand what these things are measuring and ask questions about them. Right. Yeah. So once you have an assessment system in place, you should educate your family so that they can look and be aware. Okay, so I see that my child should be about here, and they're not quite there yet. So I do want to start that conversation with my teacher. I want to start that conversation to understand from my child's teacher, what more can we be doing, learn more about what she may be doing to make sure that my child is going to be a successful reader. And I think that there are things like that we often don't do that we ought to be doing, because families can also help so much when they recognize. Yeah.
And they want to help. I know that for low-income families, single moms especially, you're just drained at the end of the day. But I have not really met a parent who didn't want to make sure that their child receives the type of education that he or she needs to be able to be successful in this world. And where they may not have graduated from high school, I'm talking about the parents now, or perhaps they didn't go to college, that doesn't mean that they can't sit down with their children and go over the homework, or, read with their children, or listen to their children read. There are so many things that parent can do. And so I agree with you. Keep it simple. And whatever parents can do and whatever they are willing to do, let's make sure that we are on the same page with them.
Absolutely.
And so you've been sharing gems throughout this conversation about leadership, but this is our chance to really think a little bit more concisely about this idea what a principal's responsibility is and what a superintendent even of a whole school system can and should be thinking about and really doing to make sure that all students who are experiencing reading difficulties, and including students with dyslexia, are really getting the support and service that they deserve. So
Right.
hear from you on that. Yeah.
Right. Well, you know, again, when I think about, even as I go into schools now, you know, and at the beginning of the school year, I'm always eager to meet with the principal and let the principal know, you know, I'm observing, you know, these novice teachers. Here's my card, you know, I'll be sending you reports. And, you know, this semester I have 6 teachers, and of course, we're not going into schools. So I've met with 4 of the 6 principals virtually. In the other 2 principals, I know they're busy. I absolutely 100% know that. But it is absolutely important for principals to be aware of what teachers are teaching. And I'll give you a perfect example. Whenever we scheduled professional development sessions for teachers, I was always in those sessions, partially because I really wanted to know what teachers were learning. I love learning, and I want to know what you are learning. I don't want to hear later that we didn't get good training on this new curriculum. So I want to be in the training. I want to know what you're learning. I want to be able to ask questions. I want to hear the answers to the questions that you're asking. And so I just think it's so important for principals to be at the professional development sessions. Be aware of what is going on in your school, and especially as it relates to curriculum related to reading. Reading is the #1 most important. I mean, I know that there are all these other areas, but when I think of academic instruction, I just think of how important reading is. And that is the professional development session that principals should always attend. I think another thing that's important for me is be willing to listen to your teachers. You know, when teachers come into your office as the principal, and you're the principal, and they're telling you what is happening, I've got this student and he or she is just really not getting it, and I'm doing everything that I can. I've met with my mentor teacher and we've tried some things. You know, it's important for you to listen to that teacher. Follow up, go visit the classroom. Once the teacher has talked to you, you know that there's a problem and that teacher is trying. Now you can go. You can invite another teacher to go in with you and begin to identify what the teacher is talking about in terms of the type of instruction. Now, of course, that is assuming that you know that the curriculum that you have is the curriculum that is going to ensure that students are getting evidence-based teaching and learning. So that's the first thing. But once you know that, after you've listened to that teacher, please follow up. I have to say how important this is. Listen to parents. You know, I used to tell teachers or tell parents, you know, your child's teacher is your best friend. Even if you feel like, oh, that teacher, you know, she or he they didn't follow up, they didn't, you know, do whatever, my child was crying. Okay, that may be true, but please, administrators, please, principals, listen to parents. They may not know what the problem is, but I promise you, they know there's a problem. They are the ones who hear their children say, I don't want to go to school today. All the other kids read better than I read. And parents hear that. And so now they're looking for a solution. And if we as administrators are too busy to listen to the teachers and to listen to the parents, then how in the world is the child going to receive the equitable instruction that he or she requires? And then I will also say, please be an advocate. Be an advocate for your teachers. Be an advocate for parents. I remember one parent telling me, I don't want my child labeled, Dr. English. I really just, I don't want to, have my child tested. And because, once you get children tested, then they're labeled, oh, Joey is dyslexic. Okay, and I absolutely understand that. And I think as educators, we've all heard the scenario of, well, if you don't get the child tested, think about this. If the doctor said that your child had asthma, wouldn't you make sure that you went back for whatever the number of appointments and you got the medication that your child needed and everything? And I'm not suggesting, medication, but I am a big advocate for, let's find out what's going on. So I've had parents cry before in my office. I have actually gone to testing sessions with parents and kind of held their hands and said, I am your advocate. I am listening. The teacher will go with you. We've got to find out what is going on. And I believe this with all my heart. If teachers are doing what they're supposed to do, and typically they are, if they have the type of curriculum that is going to be based on phonics and phonemic awareness and all of the fluency and comprehension, all of that. So we've got the type of curriculum, we've got the teacher who cares, we've got the principal who's going to be an advocate for the child. If the child is not learning, it's probably something else. And now that's where assessment comes in. But I'm your advocate. I am going to be there. The teacher is going to be there because we want to make sure that your child receives what he or she needs. So I try to help parents, don't ever think of the fact that your child is going to be labeled. Your child is going to get assessment and intervention early enough to make a difference in their little lives.
That is such an important message, because I think, again, some of these parents, right, from the community may have had that experience themselves of being labeled, of being put in another room where there were very low expectations and very few opportunities. And so I can definitely sense from different communities, right, that there are these different experiences with special education and with special education assessment. And so being there to be that bridge to say, it's not going to be like that. It's going to be something different for your child, and making sure that it is different, that it's not just a ticket to low expectations or classrooms where the students don't have the opportunities to move on to graduate high school or to move on to higher education. And I think we have to be very active in really disrupting that cycle of saying it would be better for the child just to sit in the corner and get nothing. Is not the answer either, right? So I think that we have to really figure out how to bridge those fears and concerns, which are valid, I think, are valid for many people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And parents who say that their children don't want to go to school, and the first thing, I always ask them, of course, when I was a principal, is, well, did they tell you why? Well, no, they just said, my stomach is hurting, or my head is hurting. Did they say that they didn't like? No, they love their teacher, So then once you get rid of all of that, now you can dig deeper and say, you know what? It's something else. It absolutely is something else. And I think if parents know that you care, that teachers care, that administrators care, and we are doing what we're supposed to do, then I think we can make a difference for all children. My heart is in the place where I grew up, and that place is where low-income neighborhood, mom, single mom, someone who worked all her life to make sure that we got the best education, someone who wasn't always able to be at the school, but was always willing to read a story to us at night. And so that's what I want for children. And on some days, I'm happy because I see it. And there are other days that my heart aches when I leave a school because I know that it's not happening and it's affecting the lives of those children. Yeah.
Wow. I'm kind of blown away and speechless right now, Carrie. I don't know how you're feeling.
Oh, same. I know how important it is for schools to partner with parents. And I don't always see that happening. And so I so appreciate you making that point, Cheryl. And I hope we see more of that.
And just your empathetic leadership and the way that you care for teachers and the way that you care for students and their families. I think that's so apparent in the way that you talk about leadership.
Yes.
And I think that all of the frameworks and strategies in the world really cannot necessarily replace that desire to empathize and to be an advocate and a supporter of everyone inside of our education systems. And I think that's a rare thing. And so it's just been such a huge privilege to talk to you today. It's been really a wonderful conversation, and we just are so appreciative both of your leadership and advocacy in your work as you continue to support novice teachers and new school leaders, but also with us for the core advisory board. You're going to be such a powerful voice and contributor to that group as well. So we're really, really excited and so grateful for you.
Well, I am as well, and thank you all so much for this opportunity. It's funny, I've been at SMU now for, I guess I'm going on my 13th year, and the children and the parents that I just talked about, like I can still see their faces. I remember the little boy that I went with him and his parents, he and his parents, to a session to hear the results of his dyslexia assessment. And I'm so excited. That young man is a senior. He's an engineering major now in college, and he's a senior. And so, you all gave me the opportunity to really reflect and to think back to all of those experiences. And so I'm just honored and really full right now about the future and what can happen for students and parents. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, Cheryl. Monica, did you want to say just a few words in closing about Pivot and Core?
Yeah, so we would be remiss if we didn't mention that Pivot and Core are very dedicated to addressing exactly some of the issues that Dr. English has been sharing with us around improving teaching and learning and making sure that all students have access to an outstanding, excellent education, I think is what we're really dedicated to. And it's exciting to have the expertise of Core and the expertise of Pivot working together at this point to be able to support districts and schools and teachers in the classroom. And so, Carrie, I think you can talk a little bit about some of the amazing resources that Core has.
Absolutely. Core has been working for quite some time to develop resources specific to students with word reading difficulties, including dyslexia. And we have this wonderful resource library that is available to anyone at no cost. And you can access that resource library on Core's homepage. There's a link there on the homepage. But just to give you an idea of some of the things that you'll find in that library, we have white papers on dyslexia, we have recorded webinars, we have articles, we have links to free resources around reading support. You name it, it's there. So I highly encourage folks to take a look at that resource library. And then Monica, if you move forward to the next slide, I just also wanted to share that Core is here to support you as a teacher and your school and your administrators to address your specific goals and challenges and capacity building needs related to ensuring that all students become successful readers. CORE is also there to help you make sure that students are successful in math as well. We can customize our support, and we would love to work alongside you to improve education for all of the students in your building.
And Carrie's being humble, but she just recently recorded 2 amazing webinars, specifically addressing both understanding dyslexia, and she's gotten wonderful feedback and praise from teachers and school leaders. And then the second webinar is actually about how to provide these supports even in distance learning. So for folks that are now working remotely from their students, that there are still lots of ways that we can provide really high quality reading support and interventions, even though we're separated from our students physically. So I really encourage you to look for those on the website because they're amazing. And then I'll just mention that at Pivot, we work at the district level, but to really design some of these systems that we've been talking about that are necessary, that are around understanding, do we have that high quality curriculum that's going to meet the needs of most students in our classroom, as well as those interventions to support when students are struggling or experiencing word reading difficulties. I also have the pleasure and privilege of working around special education compliance, which I know can be a bear for systems. And so we definitely want to support helping you make sure that that special education system is indeed about providing students with the access that's going to allow them to become exceptional students. And so not having special education become a place where we have only low expectations and lack of opportunity, but really a place from which kids can get the supports and education they need in order to be successful in life. And so, you know, these are our this is contact information for both Carrie and myself, and we're on Facebook and we're on Twitter. And so we encourage you to follow us or reach out to us because we'd love to learn more about how your system is working, how your schools and classrooms are working with students with dyslexia and word reading difficulties. And so please, we hope you enjoyed this. This was our very first bite-sized conversation, but we're really excited about it and hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did. So thanks so much for being part of our, joining us today.
Yeah, and thank you again, Dr. English. It was a pleasure to speak with you.